Ahoy hoy, I'm Planarwalk. And in my most recent video I said about how I was going to come back to Mr. Dapperton and make more videos about Mr. Dapperton, and the subject that I was going to cover was anarcho-capitalism and libertarianism. And just now, in the last day or two, also depending on when you watch this, he made a video called Anarcho-Capitalism Fully Explained. And I'm going to refute some of the points. But the problem is that the video is quite long, 27 minutes. I'm not going to go through it all at once. That's too much work for one video. I mean, it took me hours to make a 13-minute video. It's going to take me about a day or two to make a video on it that's more than half an hour long. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to split this up into small sections. So this video will be talking about one point, and the next video will be talking about another point until I've covered all the points. And there may still be points which I have yet to cover. But anyway, let's have a look at the video.
Hello, boys, girls, and those who sexually identify as a Target shopping cart. I'm Mr. Dapperton.
And I am Reason.
And I'm Lord Killian, and this is an introduction to anarcho-capitalism.
Is it just me, or do all these anarcho-capitalists look like supervillains? I mean, Mr. Dapperton looks as though Deathstroke went out and bought a suit. Although I suppose it looks cool, so... It's not, I don't have a problem with it. It's just, if you're wanting to present something, you'd probably want to present it in a way which people don't feel like you're going to murder them afterwards. Just a suggestion.
Now, if you've never heard of that term before, let me elaborate. Anarcho-capitalism is an economic system in which the government does not exist and companies are regulated by the free market while individuals abide by natural law in the form of the non-aggression principle.
So it seems this video will be about the free market and the non-aggression principle. And yeah, I do have points for these. So let's see what they have to say about it first.
Aggression refers to initiating force or fraud against someone, or otherwise imposing costs on third parties. The state is a group of people who have the perceived legitimacy to initiate force over a certain geographical area. Since we don't believe that it's right for anyone to commit acts of aggression, and government is just a bunch of people, then we don't believe the government gets to commit acts of aggression either.
That is a fair point. And when you're talking about physical aggression, I agree with you. I don't think that physical aggression should be initiated against anyone. Like war, for example. I am against war. But I have a feeling you're talking about taxes, and that's where I disagree with you. So I'm just going to wait for you to bring up that, because I really do feel like you're going to bring up taxes.
You're probably wondering what the difference between corporatism and capitalism is. Well, in a capitalist society, you get to vote with your dollars. If you don't like what a business is doing, then all you have to do is not support it. And when enough people stop supporting that business, it will go bankrupt. That's called the free market regulating itself.
If what you just said was true, and the market were able to regulate itself, wouldn't Apple have gone out of business? I mean, they keep on selling a phone, which they remove things like the headphone jack, for example. Don't you think that it would have gone out of business? Because people are up in arms about them removing the headphone jack, yet they haven't got out of business yet. They haven't stopped producing iPhones. The reason why they haven't stopped producing iPhones is because people are stupid. People go and buy it. People don't know how to boycott a product. They either convince themselves that they still need it, like an iPhone, or they just plain don't know how to boycott shit. And that's why companies that people don't like will always stay in business, such as Apple, such as EA, such as Microsoft. All these companies which people don't like are going to stay in business regardless, because people feel that they need them, or people feel like they're still a good company even though they do some shitty stuff. When you realize that people are stupid and people don't have the ability to actually vote properly with their dollar, then that's where the free market just falls apart.
But in a corporatist society, the state decides in part what companies deserve our business. Through regulation and subsidies, they pick winners and losers and dictate the terms of doing business. Bigger corporations buy power from the government through lobbying and kickbacks to have new regulations put in place that will choke the competition, or as economists call it, regulatory capture, while government uses taxes and central banking to prevent the market regulating itself.
Yes. Under the current society, basically a corporation can come along, buy the government, and then use its power to exploit people, exploit the government. And I think the government needs to be changed so that this can't happen. But you don't have to go ahead and do away with the government. You can just change the government, you know. And also, another side note is that when it comes to corporations being able to do this, to start off with, they need the money to be able to do this. You can't just be a corporation and be like, all right, I'm going to buy the government with my $2 and then expect to make $1 million. You've got to actually have the money already there. And if you already have the money, and under an anarcho-capitalist, you'll probably find a way to choke the competition. You just need to work out how.
So can we please stop pretending that America is some kind of bastion of perfect capitalism? It isn't.
I've got to agree with you there. Like, it's not a good place for capitalism.
It's not even the closest in the world. It's currently number 17 on the Index of Economic Freedom, tied with Denmark. The Netherlands, the UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand are all examples of countries that are more capitalist than the United States.
Funny you should bring up New Zealand. I live there. We've got this thing called socialism. It means that basically I can study and not need to have a job. And if you've ever gone and studied, you'll know that study can be hard and having a job can really impact the amount of work you can do. And we've also got great healthcare and great services such as family planning, which are subsidised, and all these things that are subsidised by the government, you know. And if we didn't have them, New Zealand would be a crappy country, kind of like America is. So I think you've just proved my point there of it comes down to how you write regulation. Not government's bad, but write the right regulation.
For a few minutes, I want you to look at the state as a business. It has a monopoly on the use of force, and you are forced to associate with it. Now, government also provides services like healthcare, food stamps, and police. You may agree that you want these services, but the state doesn't let you pick and choose. If you like food stamps, but not war, you still have to pay for both. And since the state doesn't let you take your money elsewhere, it is in fact stealing from you.
I was wondering when you're going to bring up taxes. But here's the thing, taxes are used to provide a service. It's not like businesses aren't doing this already, using one part of a service to sell you two parts. Like, take internet companies, for example. They'll hook you up with cable, even though you don't want cable, and make you pay for the cable as well as the internet. So, corporations already do this. And another thing is a solution to this. When you go to pay your taxes, if you want your taxes to go towards a certain thing, you tick that thing. So if you want them to go towards food stamps, tick food stamps. You don't want them to go towards war, you don't tick war. That's probably the best solution. I heard that solution from Serge Tankian.
Not to mention the fact that it's crowding out any private markets for these. Before government meddling in healthcare, for example, we had mutual aid societies that were voluntary, but worked out the way statists would like universal healthcare to work.
Now that doesn't sound too bad. Because when it comes to volunteer organisations, they can do a lot of good. But here's the thing, they need money. Now here's where we reach a compromise. You would like a lot more of these, and I think government can help. You see, if government were to help subsidise these volunteer organisations, then don't you think it would work a lot better? Here's where my constant thing of writing the right policy, writing the right regulations comes into play. If you write the right regulations, you can have this.
The state steals from everyone. If you don't think they're stealing from you, then don't pay your taxes and see what happens. First, you'll receive notices from the state telling you to pay your taxes. If you continue not to pay, they will take you and kidnap you and throw you in a cage, seize your property, and if you resist, they can kill you. Don't believe me? Look up a guy named Eric Garner.
Now, I don't know about you, but that sounds a lot like theft and extortion by a criminal mob to me. The government is just one big gangbang, and we have to pay protection money to them, or they can kidnap you, steal from you, hold you for ransom, and kill you if you resist.
And that's not even the worst part. They pay for roads, they pay for public services such as police and fire brigades. They also pay for public libraries. There's also social welfare that they pay for. If you're pregnant and can't get a job, they supply you with money. How horrible is that? Yeah, that's what I thought. Like, what, do gangs do that? No.
Think about any time you have to deal with bureaucrats, whether it's the DMV or the Social Security office or paying a ticket at the courthouse or whatever. How easy or convenient do they make it for you? You have to fill out Form FS16-1982-J or whatever, instead of, say, simply going to a website like you do when you pay your credit card bill, or do anything else in the market. With a free market, there's competition, so they have to make it easier for you because you can always leave. With government, you don't have a choice.
Well, that's assuming that you don't have a monopoly. I mean, under anarcho-capitalist, if a monopoly forms, it's fucked. And the things that you were saying about just there, they would be the easiest things to form a monopoly on.
Now, you may be wondering how anarcho-capitalism will work without government enforcing laws. Well, it's quite simple, actually. Libertarians base their ideals off a philosophical understanding derived from first principles called the non-aggression principle.
The non-aggression principle, or NAP, in the simplest terms, states that the initiation of force is not logically justified, and in doing so, those who are having force initiated against them have the right to use equal or greater force to correct for this act of aggression. Rights exist in a negative context, as they are passive and require no initiation of force to protect, and can only be taken away from an individual through an initiation of force.
You know, that sounds pretty good. Non-aggression principle, I'm all for it. And in fact, it's how I'd imagine that communism would work. And I'm meaning pure communism, not this Russia bullshit. I'm talking about pure communism. Would work with a non-aggression principle. And in both cases, both anarcho-capitalist and communist, you'd have to wonder who would uphold these. And if the people that are upholding them decide to pervert them, then that's when you have a problem with it. But apart from that, it's pretty good.
So then what specifically are human rights under natural law? It all begins with self-ownership. You own yourself. You own your time. You own the thoughts in your head, your body, and anything it might do or have done to it, and the fruits of any labor it produces. To deny self-ownership would mean that someone else could legitimately claim this power over you, making you their slave.
You've surprised me. You are very good for arguing for communism. These stances that you've got here are very good for communism, you know. If you are working at Burger King, you should get the fruits of your labour. So just say there's someone selling it, someone flipping the burgers, someone making the burgers, right? You should divide up the amount that's made between those people. However, in anarcho-capitalist, what I assume would be happening is the boss would decide. And that's really not you owning the fruits of your work, or the fruits of your labour. That's the boss owning the fruits of your labour.
Notice that what isn't included is something that's laughably called intellectual property. Actually, it wasn't called that in the olden days. It was actually called censorship until people realized that censorship was a bad thing because freedom of speech is an inalienable human right, and infringing on it is an infringement of liberty. So they had to rename it in terms of property to try and cover up for the fact that it is censorship.
Here's a thought experiment for you. Just say you made a great invention, and you go ahead and sell it. You only sell 2 copies of your invention, or whatever it is. And someone else with a lot more money comes along and buys it, realizes it can be great. So they go ahead and mass produce it and sell millions of copies of this thing. And they were only able to do so because they had the money. Now, you've spent a lot of time working on this thing, so you should have the right to have that as your intellectual property. Now, obviously, I don't agree with intellectual property on everything, but that's one place where I can see that intellectual property is useful.
Another common argument is without police, how would you protect your property? Which is pretty funny, seeing as private property rights are passive and can only be deprived through the initiation of force, while the only thing that is required to maintain it is that no one attempts to initiate force to take it.
Exactly. Property rights as a concept were created to protect people's property from the state.
Wait, when has the state tried to take... Oh, I know when. Yeah, the state obviously came into my house and took away my League of Lamb. Yeah, that's what happened. Totally. Yeah. It wasn't some person that just wanted to... that was poor and needed food. It was someone from the state. Yeah, them bastards.
But just for an instant, let's humor this argument. How would private property be protected? Well, first of all, there's our natural right to keep and bear arms. We can do that to act in our own defense and defense of others like neighbors, co-workers, and family members.
Yeah, I don't have a firearm, and even if I did, it wouldn't have helped because I was out when my League of Lamb got stolen, so... Damn state.
There's also the option of private security.
Now, before you say that private security isn't as effective as state-provided police, I want you to see this.
If you want to see what they were going to show, I'll supply a time code to the part in the original video. I'm not going to make this video too long. It's already gone on long enough. I can see that it's at something like 14, 15 minutes or something like that. But the thing is, when it comes to these private sectors, you don't need to privatize everything. You can have that with a government. It's just writing things right so that it's not impacted in a bad way, you know.
But let's consider the real issue. How much of our wealth is government soaking up? Government at all levels takes about 52% of the national income in taxes, fees, and so on. So already, we're left with just 48% of our purchasing power.
So they clearly forget to mention that government helps people by using this money to spend it on things like education. So you'd have higher prices for education if the government wasn't taking your money and spending it on things like education. So you have to really adjust your figures there.
But that's hardly the whole story.
Government also robs from us through inflation. They've been doing it continuously since the Federal Reserve was created, such that a dollar is now only worth 4% of what it was then. But let's not go back that far. In fact, let's actually skip the 70s, since that was very much an unusual situation. So let's go all the way to 1988, the last year of the Reagan era, when the economy was doing pretty good. According to Westegg inflation calculator, $1 in 1988 is the equivalent of $2.06 in 2016.
So if government had stopped inflation at that point and went to sound money, each dollar we earn would go twice as far.
Wait, what? Okay, you do realize that the amount of money an average person makes has increased, right? I mean, if you take the minimum wage, in 1990, the minimum wage was $3.80. And in 2009, the minimum wage was $7.25. So, yes, the minimum wage has increased along with inflation. You do realize that, right? Right? You're not that stupid, right? You understand things like that, right?
But we're not done yet. Government also imposes indirect costs in the form of regulations. We'll show you in a minute how out of control the regulatory state is, but for now, according to a 2013 study in the Journal of Economics Growth, the cost of all this regulation is $277,000 a year to the average American family. Our GDP would be $54 trillion instead of just $16 trillion. We are 75% poorer because of federal regulations, and that's not even counting state and local regulations.
I have said many times you must write regulation in the right way. I find it annoying that I've got to bring up these points time and time again, but I guess you can't hear me, so...
So basically we're left with 25% of 48% of 48%, leaving us with less than 6% of our purchasing power. And we know that's lowballed because remember, we're not counting state and local regulations or businesses that have been driven out by these costs. So without government, our paychecks will be going over 17 times as far as they are now.
Killian, I thought you were smart. In fact, I know you're smart. I've seen your video series on cryptography. So that means that you're lying. I mean, surely you would have known that the amount of money you make from inflation affects average people as well. It affects the minimum wage. So, yeah, can you please stop lying to people? Please? Now, that's all the points that I'm going to cover today. That took a lot longer than I was hoping. In fact, it's just about to go dark outside, so yeah, I've got to wrap this video up. But yeah, I did get sidetracked, and it did go for a lot longer than I was hoping for it to go for. But I did cover most of the points around the two things that I said I was going to cover. Should have only said I'd cover one, but nah. But anyway, if there's a point that you feel that I missed, make sure you let me know. If there's a point that you want me to cover in the next video, let me know as well. I'm going to try and get this next video out in maybe a couple of days. See how it goes. But yes. Anyway, leave a like and subscribe if you liked this video. Leave a comment of what video you'd like me to make. You know, there's a whole lot of videos that I can make. And I will see you in the next video. Between you and me, thank you for watching.